Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to share some tips with you on how to get the most from your alcohol markers, no matter what brand you have, no matter what mishmash of alcohol markers you have. I think this video today is going to really help you understand your markers a little bit more and get better use from them. I want to preface this video with the fact that this is going to be a long video. I've been getting some comments on my longer videos, and I've seen this on other channels with longer videos too, with people complaining about how long it takes to get this information out. This is pretty in-depth. I've spent days doing the swatches. I've spent years researching and developing my techniques, and you just can't put that out in a 3-minute video and expect to impart all of that knowledge onto the viewer. So if you don't want to see a long video, this is not for you. We're also going to be doing a demo of coloring this here at the end, and that takes time. So I just want to put that out there. If you don't want to see a long video, if you don't have time to spend, then this is probably not the video for you. So I've done some coloring with these markers. You can see that I've got them bundled up, and I'll tell you why in a second. And this is the new Ohuhu set of 120 markers. You don't need that many markers. You don't need that brand of markers. Just telling you what I'm using here. So the first thing I did, as usual, when I got a new set of markers is I swatched them out. I like to see what I have for a variety of colors. It's important, no matter what markers you have, especially if they're alcohol based, that you swatch them out, because the colors on the caps are not always indicative to what the ink looks like. And you want to swatch it on the paper that you typically use, because you want to make sure your results are reliable. So if you're going to color an image and you stamped this on marker paper and colored your swatches on marker paper, but then you're using cardstock to color, your ink is going to be slightly different when you use it on the cardstock. So if you usually use cardstock because you're a card maker, make sure you swatch it out on your cardstock. I do use some stamps to get my swatches nice and neat. They're by Waffle Flower. I'll try to remember to link them below. You don't need to have them, obviously. You can draw boxes or just make a swatch, a scribble. That's all you really need to do. But make sure you label it. So just put the numbers there. If you're going on a dark color, I suggest using a white gel pen just so it shows up. So after you've got these all swatched, you can see what the colors really are. So let's look at these reds, for instance. Like that red is really, really pink. It's not really going to blend with these corally reds up here. It's clearly going to blend more with these guys over here. This red here, this kind of purpley color, it's actually a very reddish purple, and it can actually go up and blend with this color. So having this all laid out really lets you see what your colors are and what the color undertones are. So now what will make it a lot easier for you to use your markers is to bundle them up within the groups of their closest colors, or the colors they would blend with. So I'm not looking at the value of the colors, because you could have several colors with similar values that obviously aren't really going to blend with each other. You want to look at the undertones. So look at that undertone. That's a very corally color. That's a very corally color. That's a very corally color. These are fairly corally. So you'd want to bundle those up. And then up here you've got more of these cranberry to a crimson red. So you'd want to get the cooler crimson reds together, the warmer corally reds together. And that's what I did here. And then I've got my purpley reds together here. So I bundled them up, so when I'm going to go blend something or I'm going to color something, I can grab that bundle that's going to most closely color my my images. Now that's pretty good on its own. However, we can't really trust the caps to be absolutely perfect. They're not the right value. I've never seen any that are absolutely perfect. Some are better than others, but you're looking at something colored in plastic versus how ink is going to look on paper. So then after you've got them bundled up, and this might take some time, so if it takes you a couple hours, don't be hard on yourself. Like there was 120 colors here. It took me a while. And then, I realized that fluorescent is really a coral. I also wanted to mention, with this 120 set of Ohuhu markers, the fluorescents are actually alcohol pens. In the other sets of Ohuhu markers I had, the fluorescents were water-based. It was very bizarre. But in this 120 set, they're alcohol-based too, which I would think they should be in all of them, but that's the case with these anyway. And then like that fluorescent orange, I can put it with those oranges. And this fluorescent pink, it's really similar to the pinks in here, so that's going to blend well with those. So you really want to trust your swatches and your eyeballs on the swatches to how you bundle up your markers. Now, if you've say bought a set of markers and they fit in a bag, they come in a bag, after you've bundled them with elastics, they might not fit very well, or they might be really tight to close. So I do apologize. That's kind of like the one bad thing about this. If you're going with a set that's, that's going to fit in a bag and you're not getting any other markers. It's kind of tricky. So after you've bundled them up, what I recommend you do is make a swatch. So try not to put more than 12 markers in a bundle because it'll get a little confusing. And if you're a beginner to blending and you have a hard time noticing the colors or seeing the undertones of the colors, but keeping them in groups of 6 or under might be a better choice. And some colors are going to be difficult to categorize. Like, for instance, this color right here, which I showed you on the swatch. Remember how I said you could blend that really well with that number 1, that kind of wine color. But you could also blend it with these colors here. So being able to have these swatches like this, where I have 12 cubes, I can take them off the binder ring and I can hold them next to each other and see how they're going to blend. I also punched holes in all of these swatches so that I could go over to my bigger swatch sheet and say, how would that blend with 85? I don't have that one on the sheet. I can see it's a little bit more red than purple, but I can see that it would probably shade it just fine. You know, when you can put your colors over like this, you can kind of see how things are going to look together and how they're going to blend, how the values compare, and it's just really useful. Also, say you are trying to color something, like you've ordered a set of stamps, and let's say for instance that this is an index on a stamp package and it's got like a coloring idea for you. You could actually take your swatches and you could hold it over the artwork on your stamp package and say, okay, what did they use there? I want to color it just like that. What should I use to color it like that? And you can move these around and you can see exactly what colors it is you want. You could try different colors to the background and see what's going to look nice together. So it's great for matching, it's good for seeing what's going to be close for blending, and it's also good for putting colors together to decide what you want. So as you start grouping, you'll probably start with like really specific groups. Like I had these 3 oranges together, and then I had like these browns together. But then as I started swatching them out, I realized that I could really put the oranges and the browns together because these warm browns have strong orange undertones, and it's like saturated to desaturated. And I knew I was going to be able to blend these, and then I realized that I could use those colors very easily to do some animal coloring. So having those options together, it just will kind of make ideas click in your brain. And it's just by going with the undertones. The common denominator is the orangey undertones in these. So here, these were pretty much all the yellows from this kit, and I realized I only had one cool yellow. Now that's kind of a bummer, because if you want to color something that's got cooler yellow tones to it, this kit of markers, even though it had 120 markers, wasn't really going to fit the bill. So the other thing that's really handy about having your swatches like this is that when you go shopping, you can take this with you. Okay, so if you go shopping, ordering online is really tricky with markers because not only are your caps not really accurate, you're also looking at a computer screen or your phone screen, and you're looking at a digital reproduction of that color, and it might not be exactly what you want. So I would recommend going to a store, and say you go to a store and they have some open stock markers, okay? The color names and numbers probably aren't going to be the same as what you have, although I will say that most of these newer, inexpensive markers use the same numbering system. Now, the numbering system doesn't really have much to do with what their color or value is, but it does, I think there's some factory they're probably all getting their ink from, and those are the ink color numbers, but it can help you if you know that, say, color 42 you're almost out of and you just want to get that color and not rebuy a set. If you know, like, say, right here, this art marker, which is a generic one I picked up at AC Moore, if you know that that 42 is going to be the same color as the 42 from your Hoo-Hoo set, or from, you know, I know that the concept markers at Jerry's Artorama are the same, you could match it up pretty well. Actually, that doesn't even look like it's a perfect match, but that's what a 42 there looks like. It just gives you kind of that, you know, kind of a little bit of a base of reference. Like this is a 55 from Jerry's Artorama, the concept line. And let's see what I think that matches the markers, the Hoo-Hoo markers really well. So if you just need to get one marker because one's gone dry, that's going to help you. So let's see, 55, right here's 55. See? You can get a good match that way. This isn't dry. It'll lighten up a little bit as it dries, but there you can see. And by being able to peek through the hole, you can see exactly if it's a color you already have, if it's a match, or if, you know, it's going to work well with what you have. So let's say you want to get some cool yellows because your set has no cool yellows. So what you want to do is bring the cardstock, a scrap of the cardstock that you always color on, to the craft store, the art store, and generally they have no problem with people swatching out the markers, because I always see paper with marker swatches on it in the aisle. So here is CT1 by Spectrum Noir. Let's do, this is CT3. This is CT4. We'll try these and we'll see if any of these are going to be something that's going to be useful to what we already have. So then what you can do is grab your swatch and then just compare and see what's going to be really different from what you already have. Now actually, holding these up, I thought these were going to be really different, but you know, CT3, even though it's supposed to be a cooler yellow, it looks an awful lot like the 37. The CT1 is quite a bit lighter than anything I have here, so if I was going to buy one, I could buy that one. It would be pretty different. And you know, the CT4 looks just like the 37, so there really wouldn't be point for me to buy those two, but getting that one would add to my collection. I could use it to have a lighter shade of that fluorescent one. And so what I would do was I would just write CT1, color it in, and punch a hole with just a regular old hole punch and add that to my collection, and I would put that in my yellow bundle right here. So that's going to keep you from buying duplicate colors, and it's going to help you. So say you you want to buy the biggest marker set you could afford so you could get started, and so you bought a set of 40 colors. And you know, you can pay about 50 cents a marker for these online, so it's like on Amazon, so it's very affordable. So say you spent $20 and got a set of 40, and then you just knew you needed a few more colors. Well, you could take your swatch into the store, do my little example like I showed you, and just get the few colors that you need without spending an arm and a leg, or without deciding, well, I guess I'll go buy the bigger set and then have like all of those duplications. Because when you're buying markers, and the company offers like a 40 set and a 60 set and an 80 set and a 100 set, each of the bigger sets combines or includes all of the sets in the smaller, all the colors in the smaller sets. So you wouldn't probably want to buy the 80 set and then run out and buy the 100 set, because you're only going to get 20 new colors. It'd make more sense just to go to the store and buy the few colors that you need. I hope that makes sense. So that's pretty much what I wanted to explain in this section, was how to group by undertones, and then how to make your portable swatch sheet. Keep it so you don't have more than 12, and I like this because you always have your colors on the edge, so you can hold these up to another color. Like if I wanted to take this apart, I know I'm getting long-winded. I know people are probably typing on the keyboards right now. Get on with it, Lindsay. But so you can hold stuff next to each other when you have them on the edge, and you can kind of see how colors work together, which is kind of like when you're at the paint store and you got your paint chips out and you're holding paint chips against wallpaper samples or whatever it is that you're trying to match. It just makes it a lot easier. And then having your full sheet that you can, you know, say, ooh, how'd that yellow and purple look? That looks pretty sweet. You know, you can move stuff around and you can get another way to combine colors. So now we're going to go on to the demo where I'll show you how to color this, and also give you some tips for adding other media to your markers in case you're working on a limited supply, just to kind of sweeten stuff up, make it a little bit prettier, and get a little more versatility out of your product. So we'll see you in the demo. Before I filmed, I decided that I would test my methods, and I just did a couple simple things. I'm going to make some spinner cards. That tutorial's coming up soon. Probably I haven't filmed it yet, but I figured I need these stamps anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and color them. And I really thought it was a lot quicker and easier to blend having this system going. So I thought this would be a really pretty one to color. There's some daffodils as an interesting background that I could do a flat color because it's got some interesting collage elements. I stamped it in Memento because I know that's just a tried and true ink to use for my alcohol pens. If you have an ink you prefer, that's totally fine. There are others out there that will work. That's just the one that always works for me. And I did put this back on the ring just so you kind of see how I typically would work with these. So I want to do daffodils, I want to do some pale yellow, I want to do some coral centers, so I'm going to look and see what I have here. Now, I really like 45. I think that's a really nice yellow to start with, so I'm going to look at my yellows that have 45 on it. That's this one right here. Now, the thing that I noticed with this set is I didn't have any cool yellows. I had a fluorescent yellow, and the fluorescents in the new Ohuhu set are alcohol-based and not water-based like the other ones were. I just wanted to make a note of that in case you got the 120 set and you had the previous sets that had those weird water-based ones. I don't know why. So I could actually color with some of these colors and then glaze over with that fluorescent if I wanted a cooler color. But I'm going to grab my yellows and I'm saying, okay, I think 45 would be really nice. Now, what would I want to do to shade that? So I could look at, I got 45 there. Let's see. That looks really too dark. That looks pretty nice. 37 looks really nice. And then if I look at 37, if I added 35 to that, I think that would look really good. So 37 and 35. And of course, the 45 that I was starting off with. I think those look really nice. You want to have a little, I mean, some of these are too close. Like if I had that color and shaded it with that one, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. So I've got some yellows. Now I want some corals for the center. Now I know that the daffodils that have the coral centers generally have white flowers, but I wanted, I want to have yellow too. So I am doing the colors I want. So let's see, I think 9, that's a color I think would look really nice for the majority or for kind of a base color. But I will want a lighter color, so I'm going to go with 9, 28, maybe 7. Those colors look like they'd be pretty good. I'm thinking though I might want something a little bit lighter, so I might want, I'm looking, 27 looks really light. So what if I take 9, that's a color I like the most. What if I put that next to 27? That's quite a jump, but that's a nice light color. It's just a little bit lighter than 28. It's actually a little bit more yellow than 28 though. So I think I will stick with these 3 colors. I think those are going to be the best ones for this. So 28, 9, and 7. Okay, so we'll start off with those. I want a color for the background, and I want some sort of teal, I think. So I'm going to see, okay, so this is kind of my medium tone. That's kind of pretty, but I think I want something a little bit darker. Oh, I like that one. I like that 66 right there. And see, I can look through that and see, oh, that's really going to make that coral color pop. What will it do for the yellows? So let me go back to my yellows and see, I think, what did I use? 45 for my lightest color. Let's see what that teal looks like. 45, that looks a little dark. I think that 66 is the color I want to do for my background. So see how that can really help you just by having those little holes to peek through. So I want 66. And I'll leave the bundle of these out. I don't think I'll use more than one color in the background, but I'll just leave it out just in case. And these little buckets are so handy for holding my markers. They're just from the Dollar Tree. All right, so I've got a few markers here to get going with. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and we're going to do our coloring. I'm going to save the background for last because I think that it would be easier to like clean up edges with this blue when I'm all done. So I'm just going to set that one up out of the way. And I'm going to start with my yellows. So I'm going to start with my darkest color, which will be the 35. And I am going to go in with a fine tip. And the fine tip on these have a gray band. With Copics, your gray band is on the brush tip, I believe. And I'm just going to go in and add my shadows. I'm going to do one flower at a time. But if you're a beginner, you could do one petal at a time if you find that you have a difficulty blending. Or if your paper does not like to blend as well. Like I mentioned the Georgia Pacific paper earlier. If I would use the Georgia Pacific paper, I would color it in with a lighter color first. And then I would go in and add my darker shades. So there's my darker. Now I'm going to go in with my medium color, which is the 37. But again, everybody has different markers, so you use whatever you have. And I'm just kind of overlapping what I've already colored and bringing that color out a little bit. It's not too big of a jump, so you might not even be able to tell the difference on camera. It's pretty subtle. The stamp right here I'm using is from Darkroom Door. The animals I showed you earlier were from Waffle Flower, and the little aliens were from AC Moore. Okay, and now I'm going to use the lightest color. Now sometimes I'll actually go in with the chisel tip, especially if I need to do a lot of blending or if I'm going to color a large area. And I'll use my chisel tip because the chisel tip can be easier to blend with. I use the chisel tip a lot if I don't have a brush tip marker, just because it will give you a nice even coating. Now looking at that, and this is where you can kind of change things up if you want to. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you know, I wish I had a little bit more difference in my colors, so I'm going to go back and see if I have anything that could be a lighter yellow. And I don't see anything here that looks lighter than what I already have, which is, let's see, I've got 45. That's pretty light. So I'm going to go and look and see if I have anything that's a little bit lighter that I might be able to blend in, maybe in a skin tone or something. I might be able to get a little bit lighter. Well, that's still pretty dark. And the warm gray is a little too pink, actually. So what you can do in this case, is you can get a colorless blender and you can lift out color a little bit. So if you find that you're like, oh, I just want it a little bit lighter in some of these areas, your colorless blender is actually a little bit more like an eraser than a blender. You can use this to clean up messes, like if you color outside of the lines, you can use it to clean up messes, and you can use it to put in highlights. So when that dries, it's going to give me a nice highlight. And actually, I should have this underneath my working area, which is just a clear, thing, because you can see it's bleeding through the back, and I don't want to stain my mat any more than I've already stained it. So I would repeat those same steps on the other flowers, but I'm going to go in and do the center here, just so I can kind of show you how I would do that. Let's move that over. And I'm going to start with my darkest color, and this is my number 7. And I'm going to, let me just double check the 9 and 7. It looks like the 7's a little bit darker. I'm going to check on my bigger swatch just so I can verify that. Yep, 7, well actually 7 is darker, yep. And then 9 is medium and 28 is lighter. See, you can't really trust the ends that well, so just keep that in mind. That's why you need to swatch on the paper that you typically use, and different papers will react differently. Now if I do need a little bit darker, I can go into that fluorescent too, and that actually will blend well with the coral. And you probably wouldn't think of that looking at this big swatch here. You wouldn't think these fluorescent colors would blend with anything, much less soft corals, but that fluorescent too will blend with a soft coral. It will give me a nice shadow if I need it. So I'm going to go in with my 7s. I'm not going to go in and add that fluorescent unless I really feel like I need it. And I'm just going to add it. I'll go by like the guide in the sketch quite a bit, and I will determine where my darkest areas should be. Generally you have your darks on the inside as well. I'll put some right in here. And just bring it to the outside and a little bit down here. Now we'll go to my medium color. And the medium colors, I like to go over what I've already done and blend that out a little bit. There's not a heck of a lot of difference between those two colors. And then I'm going to use my lightest color and finish. Now if I had a larger area to cover, I just go into that chisel tip. I do like brush tip markers if they're the foam kind of brush tip markers best, because they're so easy to blend, but they do, the fibery ones, like kind of the cheaper brush tip markers, tend to fray a little bit, so I would rather have a chisel tip than a cheaper brush tip marker personally. Now I'm thinking, boy, I think I want that fluorescent red, so I'm going to grab that right here, and I'm going to go in and add it wherever I want to have that deeper, darker, but a little bit more intense color. And since this is already saturated with ink, I really don't need to do much more. I don't really need to blend it anymore even. It'll kind of blend on its own. But if I feel like I've got it a little too harsh, then I would just repeat that dark to light process. I would go in with my next darker color and just blend it out. And the more ink you put down, you just want to be aware that it could feather outside of your lines. There. And if I decide I want to go in and add more, you know, dark with the yellow, you can layer up. So once you have put down color and you've let it dry and you're like, geez, I just want that a touch darker. You don't want to do a ton of work to it, but you want it a little bit darker. Then you can go back in and just layer it. This isn't going to give you a really super contrasty dark, but it will give you a subtle shadow, which a lot of us, I think when we're making cards, we just want a little bit of a subtle shadow anyway. So this can really help you achieve that. And also, if you don't have a lot of markers, it can really help you out. So if you look here, it didn't really show too much, but when I did my swatches, I colored the entire square, and then I colored the first two squares again, and then I colored the last square here all the way to the left one more time. So I tried to see what I could get for shadows as I was you know, if I was just layering. So that's what I tried to do. You really have to let them dry quite a bit in between to be able to get those layers to show up instead of just blending out. But that's something that you can do if you don't have a lot of markers. You're better off to invest in your lighter colors and build on from there, because your lighter colors you can always layer up, and you can always use a pack of Sharpies for that matter and some lighter markers to lighten that up. I'm going to color these other two off camera, and when we come back we'll do the background. Alright, I colored the other two flowers the same way I did there, except I went right in with the fluorescent on the bottom one because I knew I wanted that in the center because I liked it up there. And then I thought, you know, I really want to have some green stems, so I'm going to bring my green card over and just decide, no, I thought I wanted that one. Look, it's too dark, but if I look there, I can look at this and compare it to the other colors through the little hole there that I punched, and I can also have it next to it. So that's the reason I want you to not have these like smaller ones where you have no more than 2 rows, because that way you can always be next to something, or you can look through the hole. See, like with this, you can't always put something next to something else. You're gonna have this big kind of confusing small swatch. Doing like this, you can actually move it around and you can see, you know, what really works. So that's 47. And I'm just going to use the, I want it to go outside of the lines a little bit there. So I just get kind of like a little bit of a rim. And I want it to be a little bit artsy. So using the chisel tip, I can get like a little bit more of a sketchy look to it. Now my coloring is never the best when I film it because I want to have my head right over this while I'm working. So sitting back a little bit, I might be a little off when I'm coloring. So I do apologize for that, but this is going to give you the idea anyway. And for the background, you could do two-tone, but there's so much shading going on here that I really don't think it's necessary. So because I'm going to do a large area, I'm going to start with my chisel nib. The great thing about the alcohol pens is that they do not really want to streak on you, so you can have, you can get a really nice effect. Even if it looks a little streaky at first, it mellows out. So what I want to do is start off with my large area, and then I try to always work against a wet edge, and look at that, I can go right over any mistakes that I made. When I go in with a smaller tip, when you have a harder tip, like the bullet end of one of these less expensive markers, because I mean these are 50 cents a piece really, that's what they work out to, no matter what size set you buy. The harder, smaller tip is harder to blend. Now if you think about you're doing watercolor, you're painting a painting, or acrylics or oils, whatever you like to work with, and you use a tiny stiff brush, that paint's not going to blend very well. But it's going to let you control and put that color wherever you want it. See where I'm stopping right there where I have a really dark area? So that way if I do have a seam, or I can see like a streak or anything, it's not going to show up because I've got dark color there. So I try to work off a wet edge. So if I'm like, going back to that painting analogy, if I'm trying to paint with a tiny stiff brush, that's not what I want to use when I want to blend. But that's what I want to use when I want to put a detail in. So it's the same thing with your markers. When you're working in a tiny area where you need some control, like I'm trying to get around these nooks and crannies here, I want to use that small tip. But when I want to blend a large area, I want to go in with my broad tip, my chisel tip, or my brush tip if I have brush tip markers. I think there's, I mean, in one respect, it's never been a better time to be an artist or crafter because there are really nice budget options out there that there never was. On the other hand, it's overwhelming because, you know, you just don't know. You don't know if what you're getting is going to be good quality, and then if you don't have the practice with the medium, you may think that, well, my coloring's not coming out good, so it must be the markers. Because they were cheap, they must be the markers. I better go buy Copics, which is fine if that's what you want, but so much of alcohol markering comes down to practice. And I'm not saying I'm a great alcohol marker user, but there's definitely some, you know, some tips and tricks that you can employ to, you know, get a really nice look. And I want to leave a little bit of gap there because I want to see that green. If you're nervous when you're starting out and you're doing like a background like this, go for the smaller spaces. So maybe try to find a design that's like this, that has these smaller areas that you can work within. And then you can kind of get used to if it's going to streak, if it's going to blend, how it's going to work, how the ink's going to be. And it just gives you a little more time to get comfortable. Like I charged right in with the largest open area there was, because I've been coloring with alcohol markers for a long time. I started off when I wanted my alcohol pens. Copics were just starting to get really popular, but I wasn't going to spend that kind of money. So I started off getting Prismacolors, because you couldn't just go and get like a set of, you know, 120 markers for $60. You know, you're buying them by the piece, and Prismacolors were about $4 a piece, and I could find them at my local arts and crafts store. And I could use a coupon on them. So I started off with just a few of the light shades, and then I saw a sale online. I think it was Blick. And I ordered a bunch of the lighter shades, and I mixed them with Bic Markets. And I used those together for the longest time. And then I received some Copics from my mom as a gift, and those were great. But I still used them with my Prismacolors because I still had so many of those. So, you know, it doesn't hurt to try a couple different brands and see what you like. The nice thing about, like, the bigger brands is that you can get replacement markers, or with like Copic or the Blick Studio markers, you can get replacement inks. Or there's actually a few companies that have the replacement inks. So that's just a nice option. And turn your work while you're going so that you can always be approaching it at a comfortable angle. I'm just going right over that stamp area. I might collage on top of this when I make it to a card. I don't really have a plan for it yet. And practice. It takes a lot of practice. When you are, like when I made my swatches, I kept all of the scraps. Just like I had like little, you know, 2-inch wide strips of paper or whatnot. I kept those scraps because I can use that for testing my markers. Because like I mentioned, you know, do your swatches on what you use to color with typically. So you can do your swatches on those scraps. You can stamp out a bunch of things and just put them in your marker bag and practice. You know, if you're sitting around watching TV at night and you want something to do, that's a great thing that you can do. If you want this a little darker, like I could go around the edges and I can add another layer if I want to have it a little darker around the edges, and it will just blend in as it dries. Now, one other thing I want to share with you today, I know this is all about the swatch, you know, this kind of high-level swatch method, which I hope you enjoy because I find it to be extremely useful. Something else that I find really useful when you're working with alcohol pens, if you don't have a huge collection, is to employ your colored pencils. And they don't have to be like crazy expensive colored pencils. They could be any old colored pencils, and you can go in, like say, oh, I wish I had a lighter pink, but I don't. Well, I'm going to go in with this colored pencil, and I can brighten things up. Because colored pencils are semi-translucent, they will stand up on top of your coloring and give you a little extra glow, which is really nice. I really love like a white Prismacolor pencil if I want to make something like pop against the background, make it a little more three-dimensional. it just looks really nice. And you don't really have to worry about putting too much down because this paper's so smooth and the pencils are a little translucent, meaning that you're still going to see what's underneath. And because the paper is smooth, it's not what you typically use for colored pencil. You'd have something with a little bit more tooth to it, and this is like almost like glass. It's just going to grab a little bit, and it's just going to like sweeten it a little bit. So if you didn't have as many colors as you want, like I have a lot of markers downstairs, but I don't, you know, I don't know. I don't want to be bothered with all those colors. Sometimes I just want to grab a bag of markers and sit on my couch and color. I can just have a couple colored pencils or a small box of colored pencils and, you know, have a great time. And that just brings out a little bit more oomph to it. I can go in with a little bit of maybe a darker yellow. And I can add a little more shading. You know, so that will just bring another level to it. And you probably already have a few colored pencils. Colored pencils are a lot cheaper than markers in a lot of respects. And they don't dry out. So they're a really wonderful medium to have. And you can just kind of brighten and make things a little bit more the way you want them. Yeah, a little bit on your stems if you wanted them to be a little more green and less black. You do need a more opaque color if you want it to stand out. But it's fun. Coloring is fun. It's relaxing, and you know, I just want you to use the materials that you have. And I just hear so much when I am in the stamping groups about how, like, you know, Copic is everything. Don't even bother if you can't afford Copic. Don't even bother. And I think that's nonsense because the ink is virtually the same in the pens. The difference is the nibs and the fact that they're refillable, which I love, but if a lot of people never even use up a marker. So having, you know, buying an $8 marker because you'd be able to spend $7 to refill it someday, and granted you can refill it many times for that, isn't really that practical for a lot of people. So so I just wanted to put that out there in case you were feeling that like your supplies weren't good enough, and you know, you were maybe feeling sorry that you bought a certain thing. Maybe I'll bring out that little post-it, little postcard, or what do you call it, postage stamp there. I'll do that with a little bit of pencil. It's just versatile. I like it. And I'll actually be using these stamps and something else with some watercolors. If I haven't already, it'll be up on the channel soon. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. I know it was long. I know some people are going to complain, but hopefully I got the point across and it makes sense. So bundle your markers up in color families by the undertones. So like you've got your yellow leaning greens, you've got your warm yellows. I don't have any cool yellows in this set. You've got your more bluish greens. You've got your greeny blues. You've got your more true blue or violet blues. You've got your violets. You know, you got your cool browns. You got your skin tones or your kind of peachy colors. Warm grays, cool grays, your pinks. Then your more neutral reds. Then your more orangey, corally reds. Then you've got your orange. And you got basically saturated orange to desaturated. So it's like your warmer browns and your oranges. Whatever makes sense to you, that's how you should group them. But keep the undertones in mind so that when you go to blend them, like if I was to try to blend, you know, that to that would be a really difficult blend because that's a bluish green and that's a yellowish green. So I would need something to maybe kind of go in between. I'd need to go like from that to that to that if I wanted to get that range in there. And being able to take this apart, move it around, be able to lay colors over other colors and see how they look is just really helpful. It's a bit of work. I mean, this is hours of swatching. It probably seems like I have way too much time on my hands. Maybe I do. But it's going to help you understand a little bit better and be able to use your supplies a little bit more because you're going to know more about them. So just wanted to give you another look at these that I colored using the same concepts. I did a little highlighting with a white pen there. That's kind of fun to do too. If you have a white paint pen, you can do that. It's nice. I'll actually show you that. Let's zoom in one more time. I'll show you that, then we'll sign off. So I'm sure you're anxious to go try your markers. I gotta get dinner cooked. I'm making stuffed peppers. You know, you can just do a little bit of highlights. It might look like raindrops maybe. You know, it just looks nice. I love seeing that on people's marker art. You know, and I don't fuss too much with it because, you know, all of these markers are going to fade. Even your $8 Copics are going to fade just as quick as these are. So have fun with it. You know, I use markers because I like to color on cards and I like to send cards. But I'm not like worried about making artwork that's going to last for 500 years because alcohol pens are not going to last like that. You would want to scan them if you really wanted them to last. Oh, I really like that little bit of light on there, don't you? So, you know, give yourself a break. Have fun. It's art. It's craft. And hopefully this will make your supplies a little more useful. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments below. It may take you a little bit of time to develop your sight for seeing the undertones in a color. I know it comes easier to some people and more difficult to others. And if you have any color blindness, you might actually, if you struggle with color blindness, you might want to use your grays. And the grays will tell you WG is a warm gray, CG is a cool gray. You might want to color everything in grayscale and then glaze over with one of your paler colors. That way you don't have to worry about getting your undertones wrong if you're colorblind. Because there are a lot of very talented colorblind artists out there. And there's no reason if you're colorblind that you should not enjoy art or you should not enjoy coloring. So I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way. And some people are going to leave comments saying that I don't know what I'm talking about or Copics rule and everything else drools. But I'm here to help everybody else, I guess. So thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Sorry it was so long, but it takes time. Art takes time, right? And until next time, happy crafting!